I'm going to teach you the basics of sewing in this video by turning this t-shirt into a cropped puff sleeve, cute little top for fall or summer. I'm at the thrift store to pick up two more t-shirts to have some donor fabric or donor material for my shirt. You could also get your fabric from any fabric store. I just always like to check and see what the fabric is made out of. I try to go for more natural materials like cotton, linen, wool, stuff like that because I just like them better, but get whatever you like. These are the shirts that I got to help me make my shirt because I needed enough for my sleeves. If you bought fabric, you can totally skip this step, but when I buy like t-shirts and stuff, I like to break them down, like cutting along the seams to get the most of the shirt, like the most fabric or material to use. So that's what I'm going to do to all these shirts. Okay, so I am going to use a dress for my pattern that I really like. I like the neck of this a lot, so I'm going to use it as a guide on the fabric that I have to cut out my front piece. And then I'm kind of just going to clean the fabric up, like cut the length that I want and clean up any like rough edges. Now, if you bought your fabric, I mean, this is going to be different. So you could just skip this step. But because I'm using a t-shirt, I'm just going to clean up all the edges. I'm also going to go in with this pattern that I really like because I like the armpit of it. It fits me really well. And so I'm just going to use my fabric pin and trace it out and then go ahead and cut it out so my top is done. I'm going to use the same pattern piece as the top so then my sleeves match, but I'm going to add so much more flare to the sleeve because I want it to be a bishop sleeve. So I'm just marking that out with my fabric pin and then I'm going to cut it out. But depending on what sleeve you want, and you can use your clothes that fit you properly as a guide, you can cut the sleeve however you want, but the top part is always going to be the same with that little curve to fit your top. You can use that sleeve that you cut out as a guide onto more fabric to cut the exact same sleeve so then you have two. I went ahead and traced my front part of my shirt onto folded fabric. I just left out the scoop part so then it's just flat on my back. And then that's going to leave you with a front and then the back part, which is exactly what you want. And then I have my sleeve parts, so I cut them in half, but this is just because I didn't have enough fabric to do them in the same fabric, so I did them two-toned. But it's the same things will apply. So these are all the pieces of the pattern that I have so far, and I'm going to go ahead and start sewing them together. Okay, so the first pieces in most tops they're going to want to sew together is the two shoulder parts. So this was what's going to be your shoulder seam. That's going to hold your shirt on your body. And that's what you're going to want to sew first. When you first start your stitch, just make sure you back up over it to lock it in place. After I sew anything, I'm going to try it on because it's so easy to miss things while you're sewing if you just sew it all at once. And that was my husband. He was being so sweet and checking on me, but clearly I was not having it by my facial expressions. But, anyways, I noticed that I needed more space in my armpit, and I'm going to cut a deeper J cut in order for it to fit properly underneath my armpit to where it's not too tight. So I'm just going to mark that with my fabric pin and go ahead and cut it out. To make sure that it's even with the other side, I just pinned it closed and then folded it in half and went ahead and cut the other side out to match the exact same so they're both equal. Okay, so now I need to work on my sleeves. I'm just going to sew the two halves together, but if you just have a whole sleeve already, then obviously this step you can just skip. Okay, so I like to sew the middle of the sleeve to the middle of the shoulder first so I can make sure that it's going to be lined up correctly. And I'm just going to go ahead and pin it and do a little stitch. And then I'm going to do each side. And I'm going to go ahead and attach both sleeves. You're just going to want to make sure that you go slow and make sure that you line up your edges. Just take your time because the sleeves you don't want to mess up. As you can see, my seams are lined up perfectly, and this is what you want. Because if not, you're going to have to seam rip it, and that's terrible. Okay, so I went ahead and put it back on because I wanted to see where everything was laying and how it felt. And I was checking to make sure like I cut the armpits deep enough and everything was looking really good. So now I'm going to sew the sleeve and all the way down the side of my torso. If I sound a little repetitive, that's because I am. Try it on. Now you could leave it here because the bat wings are totally cute and that's fine. But I want a bishop sleeve. So I'm going to trim a little bit off the bottom of both of them because they're a little bit too long for a bishop sleeve because I need to be able to add a cuff. So I'm just going to match up this piece that I trimmed off the left sleeve and line it up on the right side so then I can trim off the same exact amount. You're just going to want to measure your wrist and then how far up your wrist you want your cuff to be, and then you're literally just going to cut out two little rectangles for the cuff. Okay, so in order for the sleeve to be gathered, you're going to want to use a regular stitch at first and go back and forth so it's locked. Then you're going to want to use a long stitch. Like it's kind of loose because when you do this completely around the sleeve, at the end you'll have two threads. You're going to want to pull one of the threads. It'll start to gather the fabric. Once you've gathered it completely around the sleeve, you're just going to want to make sure that it matches up with however long your cuff is. And then I do a few pins just to hold it in place. That way it's easier for me to sew around. Once you've completely sewed around the cuff, you can go ahead and flip it the right side or outwards. Just trim your threads off. Once you've completely sewed the cuff on, you're going to want to flip it inside out and seal up the cuff by just sewing down it so then it's closed. Then just go ahead and put it back on so you can see how it looks, which at this point it was looking amazing, and really the only thing left is to hem all the edges, so like the bottom, the neck, and then the end of the cuffs. In order to seal up all the ends, I folded it over twice, probably about half an inch on the cuff, on the bottom of the shirt, and on the neckline. And then it was the final try on. She turned out so freaking cute. I don't know if you can see my daughter's head right there, but honestly, love this top. So excited to style it. She turned out gorgeous. If you want to see more sewing videos, I'd be happy to make them, and obviously I can make them better as I learn. As always, stay fabulous.